everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the books I read between November 23rd and November 29th. First up, I read Small Spaces by Katherine Arden, and I gave this book 4 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt scary book for Believe-a-thon. So in this book, we're following a young girl named Ollie who has thrown herself into books after suffering a tragedy. And one day, she sees a woman getting ready to throw a book in the river, and without thinking, snatches the book away and brings it home with her. As she is reading it, she discovers the story of Beth and 2 brothers who made a deal with the Smiling Man. And the Smiling Man is someone who will grant you your greatest wish, but to get that wish, you have to pay the ultimate price. She is absolutely captivated by the story. The next day, she goes to a field trip to a local farm with her class and discovers the graves of Beth and the 2 brothers and wonders if the story could possibly be true. On the way back to the school, the bus breaks down and the teacher goes back to the farm to get some help. The strange bus driver that they are left with tells the kids they are coming for the rest of you, and Ollie's wristwatch, which has been broken, now reads the disturbing message, "Run." She decides to heed the bus driver's warning and gets off the bus, and only 2 of her classmates follow her, and they head off into the woods, which is surrounded by scarecrows, with the bus driver's departing words ringing in their ears. Avoid large places, keep to small. So I'm a scaredy cat. I do not like scary books, and this is a middle grade horror, so I wasn't sure whether I was going to enjoy this or not, but it managed to be right on the line of too creepy. So this book involves creepy scarecrows that have the ability to come to life, and we're seeing Ollie and her 2 friends having to try to outrun these scarecrows and wondering what is going on. And it definitely had just the right amount of creep factor for me, though I definitely wouldn't have read it at night. It was really interesting to see Ollie trying to figure out how much of the story she read about Beth and the brothers was true, because what she is going through now is eerily similar to what she read in the story. It is also interesting to see her trying to figure out how this wristwatch, which is extremely important to her, is suddenly displaying messages despite being broken. I definitely thought this book had a really good atmosphere. It was the perfect amount of creepy, and I definitely plan to continue on with the series, even though I've heard that the second book is creepier. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes, but I'm going to give it a chance because I did enjoy the way this book was written, and like I said, the atmosphere was really, really good in it. Next up, I read The Key of Lost Things by Shawn Easley, and I gave this book 4 stars. This was my choice for Buzzwordathon this month, and I believe the prompt was the word lost, and I think this was the only book I owned that had the word lost in it. So this is the sequel to The Hotel Between, and in that book we're following Cam, who is living with his grandmother and his sister who has spina bifida and whose parents are gone, and he ends up coming across the Hotel Between, that is essentially a hotel that is between here, there, and everywhere, and he realizes that the hotel holds secrets to what happened to his parents, and he just wants to bring his dad home because he feels like life will be easier if he can bring his dad home and have his dad's help supporting himself, his sister, and his grandmother. So this book continues on after the events of the first book, and I still really enjoy the hotel. I enjoy Cam, and I enjoyed getting to see more of Cam's relationship with his sister because it again demonstrates that even if he isn't necessarily going about it correctly, Cam loves his sister a whole ton and just wants what's best for her. And so I really like the sibling vibes in this book and how important Cam's sister is to him. I am very curious as to where this is going next because this book ended on one heck of a cliffhanger, and I'm curious to see how the author manages to progress this book based on what happened at the end. I think the hotel is amazing, and I really wish I could go stay there because it's very magical and has a lot of whimsy, and with it you can really travel from one location to another very, very quickly, though there is a lot of magic involved. And I'm really enjoying this series, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this series goes next. Next up, I read Winter House by Ben Gutterson, and I gave this book 5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt, read a book that gives you winter vibes for Believe-a-thon, and was also the middle grade monthly pick. So in this book, we're following Elizabeth, who is sent to spend Christmas at the Winter House Hotel by her aunt and uncle. Once there, she ends up finding out that mysterious things are going on and ends up getting involved. So this was a reread for me, and I love this book as much the second time as I did the first. I love seeing Elizabeth try to figure out the puzzle of what is going on at Winter House, and this is a fantastical mystery because there is a bit of fantasy involved and a little bit of magic. And I love getting to see Elizabeth kind of discover, like I said, the mystery and the magic that goes on at this hotel I enjoy getting to see her solve these puzzles with this boy at the hotel named Freddie, who is also staying there for the Christmas holidays. They have these word ladders they like to complete, which at the start of every, so at the start of the chapter, there's one where we go snow, show, shot, boot, book. And same at the beginning of each chapter, it says a troubling note, node, mode, made, mate, gate. And her and Freddie definitely solve a few of those throughout the book. I love that there are tons of puzzles in this book that you, the reader, can also try to solve along with Elizabeth and Freddie. I also love this hardcover because you've got the actual printed naked hardcover, but when the dust jacket is on, you have the little people peeking through the windows. I just really enjoy the mystery of this book, and it definitely has the winter and Christmassy vibes, and I think that Ben Gooderson does a really good job of bringing the atmosphere of this hotel to life with the mystery and the fantastical and the whimsy and the mysterious, and he just does a great job of making you feel like you're right there with Elizabeth, and I love this series so much, and I'm so glad that I enjoyed it as much the second time as I did the first. Next up, I read my so-called Superpowers by Heather Nuffer, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt, has illustrations for Believeathon. In this book, we're following Veronica, who just wants to fit in with the popular crowd at school. She's doing everything she can to fit in with them, but soon develops superpowers that seem connected to her emotions, which makes it very hard for her to fit in when her powers are going haywire. So she and her friend Charlie set out to find out where these powers came from, and could they potentially have been passed down to her from her mom, who has been out of her life for a while. So I thought it was interesting seeing Veronica try to deal with a physical manifestation of her emotions. It makes things very, very tricky for her. It is so interesting to see her trying to fit in with the popular crowd, despite the fact that they don't seem to realize she exists or who she really is, and despite the fact that she seems to have a pretty solid friend in Charlie, who could care less about being popular. It is also interesting to watch her navigate as her powers come to life, because if she thinks about her crush, hearts pop up, or if she's angry, she belches fire, or if she's sad, it starts to rain right over her. So it is interesting to see her navigate something that is already hard to do, fit in with the popular crowd, with these powers that have kind of come out of nowhere. While there aren't tons of illustrations, there are a few, and there is a demonstration of some of her powers coming to life, and how hard that is going to make things for her, because she's there and everybody can see that. It's not like it's only visible to her. So the illustrations are few and far between, but I definitely think they added to the story. And I just thought this was a decent read, and I don't think I will continue on with the series. Maybe, we'll see. But I definitely could see a middle grader really enjoying this. Next up, I read The Library of Ever by Alex Zeno, and I gave this book 2 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt, published before 2021 for Believeathon. In this book, we're following a young girl named Lenora, who is brought to the library one day by her nanny and finds a secret part of it. And the secret part of the library is actually magical. And she ends up becoming a 4th assistant librarian and has to help this library solve magical problems. So this book was too simple for me. Things just happened way too quickly. Lenora would be given a problem to solve, and she would just be able to solve it way too fast for my liking. And I think I would have enjoyed it more if the problems had been more complex and it took more work on Lenora's part to create a satisfying solution. But I can also see why this book would really work well for a middle grader, because it is definitely something that I think the problem is a me problem, not a book problem, because I think that I am just the wrong target audience for this book, and sometimes middle grade books don't work for adults, and this is one of them, and that takes nothing away from the book. I gave it a 2-star, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a middle grader would give it a 2-star, because I can see how a middle grader, especially the younger end of middle grade, could really enjoy this book about discovering this secret part of the library where you get to be a librarian and you have to solve these magical problems. And who, as a middle grader with a love of books, wouldn't have thought it was really cool to be able to find a magical library? So I can see how this book would really work for a middle grader, but this book and this series just isn't for me. Next up, I read Delivery to the Lost City by P.G. Bell. And this book fulfilled the prompt, anticipated read for Believeathon. So this is one of my 5-star predictions, so I'm not going to give you my rating in this video, but I will link my 5-star prediction 3 wrap-up in the description below if you want to know what I rated this book and what I thought about this book. In this book, we're following Susie, who one day wakes up and finds a random train in her living room, and her parents are asleep, and this train is run by trolls, and she sneaks onto it and ends up going to the land of impossible places and ends up having to help the train deliver a package. This is the conclusion to the trilogy, and we get to see basically how Susie's adventures end. So if you want to know what I thought of the end to this trilogy, be sure to check out my 5-star prediction 3 wrap-up linked in the description below. Next up, I read The Kidnap Plot by David Butler, and I gave this book 2.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt, read a book outside of your favorite genre for Believeathon. In this book, we're following a kid named Charlie who sees his father get kidnapped and goes after him with some help of some friends he meets along the way. So this is a sci-fi Pinocchio kind of retelling, because this boy is not a real boy, and it wasn't my favorite. I just didn't connect with the characters, and I didn't really care about Charlie and his journey to find his father. I did like how he picked up some friends along the way and how they were all very, very different and kind of came together and formed this bond during their quest to find out what happened to Charlie's father and to try to get him back. But I just didn't connect with this book. A lot of the details haven't stuck with me since I read it, and I don't plan to continue on with the series because I do believe this is the first book in a series. This was just a book that wasn't for me, but I didn't find anything super offensive about it, hence it being 2.5 stars, because it wasn't an awful book. It was just a book that wasn't interesting to me. Next up, I read Kikis Delivery Service by Kondono, and I gave this book 4 stars. This book fulfills the prompt, read a book whose title starts with the same letter as your first name. So in this book, we're following a young girl named Kiki, whose mom is a witch and whose dad is a human. Kids who have both kinds of parents have to decide whether they want to follow in the footsteps of their witch parent. And Kiki decides that she does. And as a witch, you go out on your 13th year to become the witch of a different town to the one your parents are staying in. And you have to be there for, I want to say, a year. And so Kiki sets off on this journey to become the witch of a new town and ends up setting up a delivery service there. So I really enjoyed this book. I liked getting to see Kiki struggle being in this new town and trying to figure out how to live up to being a witch and what exactly her role would be in this new town, because every town is different and she's always wanted to live in a town by the sea, and maybe it would have been easier if she didn't, but this was where she wanted to live. So it was interesting to see Kiki find her place in this town. I love that the way she chose to help this town is something as simple as a delivery service, and it is interesting to see what kinds of things she has to deliver and how she starts to gain the trust of this town. I also plan to watch the movie at some point because this is a, I want to say, Studio Ghibli movie, and I've heard the movie is really good too, so I just really enjoyed getting to see Kiki's journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing if the movie is as enjoyable as the book. Next up, I read A Spoonful of Murder by Robin Stevens, and I gave this book 4 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt historical book for Believeathon. So this is the 6th book in the Murder Most Unladylike series, and in this series we follow Hazel and Daisy, and they go to a boarding school in the early 1900s and solve mysteries. And in this book, they're actually going to visit Hazel's family, and a mystery develops there that they have to solve. So I really enjoyed this book. I liked getting to see Daisy have to adapt to Hazel's world as opposed to Hazel having to adapt to Daisy's, because the boarding school is, I believe, in England somewhere, and Hazel is from Hong Kong. So it is definitely interesting to see Daisy more out of her depth and Hazel really kind of in her comfort zone. And it is interesting to get to see the difference in Hazel, because she is very different when she's around her family. And it is definitely interesting to see Daisy kind of being the one who isn't sure of how she fits where she is. So it's definitely got a different balance between the two girls, and I really enjoyed getting to see that displayed. I liked seeing how they went about solving the mystery in this book, which was definitely a little different to the ones they solve when they're at the boarding school. I'm still really enjoying this series, and I have loved seeing how the relationship between Daisy and Hazel has grown throughout the books, and I am looking forward to seeing how it continues to grow in the next book in the series. Next up, I read Oathkeeper by Aaron Hunter, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt 5-star prediction for Believeathon. This is the 6th book in the first arc of 6 in the Braveland series, And in this series, we're following an elephant, a lion, and a baboon who are dealing with unrest in the Bravelands. I love how the arc wrapped up. I love seeing how Fearless, the lion, Thorn, the baboon, and Sky, the elephant's journeys kind of wrapped up in this book. I would assume, based on the Warrior series, that they won't be main characters in the next arc of 6, because at least with Warriors, we switch to new characters in each arc, so I'm going to miss seeing them if that is the case, and getting to be in their heads and experience their emotions. But I really liked the way the Aarons wrapped this arc up, and I thought that the conclusion to the arc was extremely satisfying. Though it just missed being 5 stars. It was just missing that one thing that would have tipped it over the edge. Either way, I am really enjoying the Bravelands, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the next arc and what characters we're following in that one. Next up, I read Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manisala, and I gave this book 4.25 stars. This book fulfilled Book of the Month for Phase 10 Chooses My TBR. In this book, we're following Leela, and she has moved home to help her aunt with her family's restaurant. Her high school ex is now a food critic and has been leaving a lot of the restaurants in the area bad reviews. One day, he and his stepfather, who owns the building that Leela's family's restaurant resides in, decide to eat at her restaurant, and during his meal, he winds up dead. The police are soon convinced that Leela is the prime suspect, so Leela has to work to prove that she is innocent and help save herself and her family's restaurant. So, now one of the things I really loved about this book is that right in the beginning is an author's note. And in the author's note, the author says, "I'd like to provide content warnings for indications of evidence planting and police intimidation, as well as drug use, fat phobia, racism, and domestic violence." So I like that right off the bat, you go into this knowing that there are content warnings that the author wants you to be aware of. And I thought that that was a really nice touch, because I tend to go into my cozy mysteries expecting them to be a lot lighter, and this one was a lot more hard-hitting. The content warnings are definitely there for a reason, so if that is something that you don't want in your books, I would suggest you give this one a miss. I personally enjoyed the fact that they made this cozy mystery have a little bit more meat to it, and I enjoyed getting to see Leela struggle to clear her own name, because she obviously knew she didn't kill her ex and was trying to figure out who was trying to set her up. I also really love the family vibes in this, because you get to see a lot of Leela's family and how important her family is to her, and how important family is in general to her family, as our main character is of a Filipino heritage. I also like that this book, outside of the author note, has a glossary and pronunciation guide to give you some context into honorifics or the food or other things that the author felt that you should have some background information on how to pronounce or definitions of. And I love when books that come from a different culture have that, because I like being informed as opposed to going into the book and having no idea what's going on. So again, I really like that the author started this book out with an author's note and a content warning and a glossary of common terms that you were going to be coming across in this book, because you could read them and it would help, especially with the food, help you to paint the picture of what you're seeing in the midst of the story. I just really enjoyed getting to see Leela's journey and trying to figure out the mystery along with her. And again, I like that it had a little bit more meat than most of my cozy mysteries, and I definitely plan to check out book 2. Next up, I read Squirrel Flight's Hope by Aaron Hunter, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt, has a map for Believe-a-thon. So this is a super edition in the Warrior series, and if you're new to my channel, Warriors is a series that follows forest cats who live in clans and have to try to coexist, and the super editions are essentially a standalone novel that follows one of the characters that we have met at some point during the series. And in this book, we're following Squirrel Flight. She is a character we meet in Arc 2. So I'm not really going to tell you anything about what Squirrel Flight is up to in this book, but I was pleasantly surprised. Squirrel Flight is not one of my favorite characters, so I was surprised by how much I enjoyed her story. I definitely think it adds a lot of interesting depth to the greater Warriors universe, and I really enjoyed getting to see the journey that she went on throughout this book and the characters that she interacted with, and I definitely think this adds a lot to the Warriors universe as a whole and fills in some questions that people may have had about certain aspects to the greater Warriors universe, and I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm glad that I got to spend this time with Squirrel Flight and have a better understanding of how she ticks and the decisions that she made in this book. Next up, I read Crownbreaker by Sebastian de Castell, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt newest purchase for Phase 10 chooses my TBR. This is the 6th and final book in the Spellslinger series. In this series, we're following Kellen, who in the first book is trying to convince his clan of mages that he has the ability to be a mage along with them, and he doesn't have a lot of magic. So he is trying to trick his way through the test because he doesn't want to end up being cast out, because the members of his clan that aren't mages kind of become servants to the mages, and he doesn't want that life for himself. And then one day, a woman named Ferris Perifax shows up and kind of turns his life upside down, and we get to see him go on adventures throughout the rest of the series. And I love the way this series ended. I am sad that I'm not going to be able to spend time with Kellen and a very certain friend of his. I think if you've read the books, you know which friend I'm talking about, because I feel like this character is pretty much beloved in this series, and I'm going to miss seeing what antics Kellen and this character get up to. This book had a lot of twists and turns that I didn't expect, and like I said, I'm really going to miss spending time with Kellen and getting to see what situations he has to get his butt out of, because he is constantly getting himself into trouble and seeming like he is backed into a corner and has to figure out how to get out of them. So I'm going to miss spending time with Kellen, and I really enjoyed getting to see the end of Kellen's journey. Next up, I read Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, and I gave this book 3 stars. This book fulfills the prompt, book that has been adapted for Believe-a-thon. So in this book, we're following Sophie, who is the oldest of 3 girls and wishing she had a better lot in life. One day, she ends up cursed to be an old woman by the Witch of the Waste, and she decides that the only chance she has is to go find the moving castle among the hills and the wizard Howl. There, she has to try to overcome obstacles to reverse the curse, and learns there may be more to her and to Howl than she first noticed. So I did enjoy this book, but I think that I would have enjoyed it if I had taken more time to read it. I was struggling at this point to get through Believe-a-thon, and I was so determined that I was going to read all 30 books in 30 days, and I read most of them in the second half of November. So this is one of those books that I think suffered due to the fact that I was trying to cram so much in. So the details are very, very vague in my head. It wasn't one that stuck with me, and I don't think that was the book's fault. I definitely remember enough to know that I enjoyed it, and I think I want to give it another shot, because I know there's more books in the series, and I know that this obviously has been adapted, hence why I read it for this prompt. So I think at some point in the future, I want to sit down and reread it when I can read it at a bit of a slower pace and see if I enjoy it more, because I do think reading it as quickly as I did and trying to cram as much reading into that tiny space as possible did this book a disservice, because I liked the idea of this moving castle, and I liked seeing Howl and how Sophie reacted to Howl and the reality of who Howl was versus the stories she had heard about him. So I definitely think this is a book I would like to reread and see if I have a higher opinion of before I make a decision as to whether I want to continue on with the series. Next up, I read More to the Story by Henna, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt sibling relationship for Believe-a-thon. So this is a Little Women retelling. And in this book, we're following Jamila, who works for her school's newspaper and wants to be an award-winning journalist just like her grandfather. But she butts heads with the editor-in-chief, who she feels shoots down all her stories. Her latest assignment is to talk to the new kid in school with a British accent who doesn't seem to want to share, which won't give her the kind of article she needs to enter the national media contest. Jamila and her 3 sisters are devastated when their father is sent to work overseas, but she is determined to write an article that will make him proud. But then, one of Jamila's younger sisters gets ill, and her hunger to write an award-winning article may cost her a new friendship. And Jamila begins to wonder if not only is she cut out to be a journalist, but if it's worth it. So I thought this was a really good retelling. I thought that the author did a very good job at bringing to life Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, but in these new characters. If you've read Little Women, I think you can definitely see the updated version and how Henna Khan managed to update it without losing the charm of the original story. I liked getting to see Jamila struggle with wanting to write this amazing article, but trying to balance her family life and missing her father and her new friendship and all of the things that were going on in her life, including not getting along with the editor-in-chief, but trying to rise above that. I thought this was just a really, really good retelling, and I really enjoyed it. And lastly, I read Maybird Among the Stars, and I gave this book 4 stars. This book fulfilled the prompt set in another world for Phase 10 chooses my TBR, and book set in a faraway place for Believe-a-thon. So this book is the second book in the Maybird trilogy, and in the first book, we follow Maybird, who has managed to find her way to the ever after, which is a dangerous place for someone who is still alive. And she is trying to find her way home to her mom with the help of some friends she's met along the way. So this book essentially picks up where the first book left off, and we're still with Maybird and her friends in the ever after, and she is still trying to get home. And I really enjoyed getting to see Maybird struggle to figure out how she was going to get home and how to help her friends and what was the best decisions to make for everyone involved. I really like the land of ever after and how dangerous it is for her to be there, considering that she is alive, and how it is meant to be a world for those that have passed on. I am very curious about what comes next in the final book in the trilogy based on the way things ended in this book, because it ended in a way I wasn't expecting. I'm really enjoying this series, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Maybird's journey ends in book 3. So these are some of the books I read between November 23rd and November 29th. All of my social media, including my Discord, is linked in the description below if you'd like to come chat with me about any of them. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me elephant emojis, like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!